With this chapter of Yu-Gi-Oh! We actually begin the 7th volume of the manga overall, which is the final volume of the pre-Duel Monsters section of the manga. Considering that there's multiple 2-part chapters in this volume, we'll actually be done in just a few weeks and ready to move on to the Duel Monsters stuff, which honestly I'm super happy about that. I know the Duel Monsters stuff a lot better, and it becomes far more serialized, far less episodic, so I'll be able to review longer battles and longer arcs all at once, which will really save me time. This review series will really pick up once the Duel Monsters section hits. But I am getting ahead of myself, we're not quite there yet, so let's talk about this week's 2-part chapter, Monster Fight, which honestly probably didn't need to be 2 parts, but I understand why it was, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. A new game is sweeping the area by storm called Monster Fight, and it's actually one of my favorite games from the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. I honestly think that this may be the best realized game, like, within the part of the manga that was entirely written and inspired by Takahashi himself. Because even if you look at Duel Monsters, the later, better realized, more advanced rules for Duel Monsters came from the rules that Konami came up with for the physical real-world card game. Monster Fight, though, is an entirely Takahashi original invention, and it's super well realized. It's very well fleshed out. You have a little gun-shaped device that you hold in your hand, and you can attach to the top of that device one of 100 different types of monsters, though you do have to buy and collect them to be able to use them, obviously. The monsters have different heights and builds, and their joints are even in slightly different places. Their arms might be different lengths, their legs might be different lengths. And so each comes with their own movements and fighting style, and even their own special move, and they are able to make full movements. And the controls on the little gun-shaped device are sensitive and accurate enough that you can control one of these things just as accurately as your own body. Practice enough with one of these things, and it's like you're practicing to get good at a fighting game, for example. Except that rather than being a video game, this exists in the real world. You can walk up to somebody else on the street who's carrying one of these things around and have a quick brawl with them, and that sounds like a lot of fun to me. Each monster has their own weak point. If you hit the weak point enough, the monster is knocked out and defeated. But if you knock the monster off of your opponent's gun, the monster loses anyway. And since hitting their weak point also paralyzes them for about 2 seconds, it makes it easy for you to use your special move to punch them off of the controller. There's so much room for skill and strategy in this game. I really wish something like this were real, or even really possible in the real world, because this is technology that just wouldn't really be possible in the real world, especially for a kid's toy. But it really is still a whole lot of fun, and I love seeing it in this manga. Yugi and Jinochi obviously get into it, and for once, Yugi is actually able to defeat Jinochi at something resembling a physical fight. Soon, though, everyone is playing this game. Everyone at their school is playing this game, and all of the game stores in the area are completely sold out and have been for quite a while, so anyone getting into it late, they can't. In come a guy who calls himself the Spider, though I'm sure he has a real name, I just don't care what it is, who challenges Yugi to a game, and Yugi being Yugi just assumes that this guy wanted somebody to play with and is all cheerful about it, but then the guy, of course, because it is a rule, punches Yugi in his punchable little face in order to cheat and win their fight, and he takes Yugi's gun and monster as spoils so that he can resell them. He's reselling these for about $300, or the equivalent amount of yen, I guess, and he's done this several times. He's basically scalping these things. But of course, now because Yugi has been wronged, the other Yugi comes out, he borrows Jinochi's monster and goes to fight this guy again, and of course makes their fight a shadow game. And the rest of these 2 parts, and why it needed to be 2 parts in the first place, is mostly just a really intricate, really well choreographed fight between their 2 monsters. Like, I know we've seen really well choreographed fights, really good fights in Yu-Gi-Oh! Before, but out of the ones we've seen so far, I think this one's probably the best, which is weird because it's between 2 plastic toys. And it's a really good fight. It's really worth going panel by panel and really paying attention to this fight because it's good. It's really solid. And there are some really memorable moments in here, including what I think is one of the most memorable, most evocative images in the entire early manga. At one point, the Spider tries to cheat again. He looks away from his gun just for a second so that he can try to throw an actual physical attack at Yugi's actual body, but Yugi was anticipating this, and when he sees that his opponent is distracted, he attacks, hitting his opponent's monster right in the face, and it's revealed that rather than the monsters acting as scapegoats for them in this fight, as would be normal, they actually take the hits for their monsters. Yeah, the monsters are actually still affected, because that's how the game works, but they still suffer damage when their monsters suffer damage. And so we get an image of the Spider having part of his face chipped and broken. Now he has to pay attention to the game, because if he doesn't, he runs the risk of taking a special attack through his monster. Of course, though, he can't help himself and eventually tries to cheat again, kicking Yugi in the side and then hitting Yugi's monster with a special attack, a flurry of punches. Yugi removes his school jacket and reveals that he actually did take the damage. He has dents in his chest now. And now that he has given his opponent a chance to play fair and his opponent has said, no, I'm not going to do that, Yugi increases the intensity of the shadow game, making it one that actually reads the combatant's hearts, one where you can actually die if you lose. There are other twists too, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And so later, when the spider tries to cheat again, he realizes he can't lift his leg. He looks down and he sees all of the monsters that he stole holding him in place, including his spider monster, the one he's been fighting with the entire time. At which point Yugi points out that when he increased the intensity of the shadow game, he bound the soul of the monster and the fighter together. And so the monster that the spider has been fighting with the entire time has had his face. And it's actually pretty clever. If you go back and look at all the panels since Yugi upped the ante of the shadow game, you don't see the spider's monster's face once until right now, so as not to spoil this twist. I don't exactly know why this happened, and yet Yugi's monster didn't have his face, or maybe Jinochi's face, since it was actually Jinochi's monster. But I imagine it has to have something to do with the fact that it read the spider's heart. The shadow game read the spider's heart, saw that he was not a good person, and so put him in a position where he might be punished by the shadow game. That this is his penalty. That effectively at this point he's already lost. But because the shadow game's still going on and you have to finish it, Yugi has to finish it. He throws his final attack at the spider's soul monster and punches it right through its body. We never get definite confirmation of whether or not this killed the spider too, but I think it definitely could have. And while this is a little harsh, while it's a little harsher than the other Yugi tends to go, it is pretty obvious that he went into the shadow game knowing that it could get this bad, and tried to prevent it by giving the spider a chance not to cheat, a chance to play fair. And it was because he couldn't play fair that he lost, and possibly even lost his life. There's not a whole lot more to say about this chapter. It's a lot of fun, with some fantastic visuals, some fantastic fight choreography, and panels which are just very memorable even years after having first read them. And it's also an excellent example of something that we have been seeing recently that I've kind of been glossing over to save to talk about it here. Yugi and his friends now are all on the same page about the other Yugi, at least mostly. And so in situations like this, when it comes down to Yugi needing help, he doesn't just have to rely on the other Yugi. He can go to his friends and tell them what he plans to do, that he plans to confront this guy again. And they can help, like when Jinochi let him borrow his monster. Like, Jinochi would have done that in past chapters before he knew about the other Yugi, but here he knows why Yugi needs it. And so it is these chapters where this stuff is just beginning to happen, which not only set up chapters which come very soon after this one, but it also sets the stage for later on, all the way up to the very end of the series, when Yugi and his friends are working together to overcome evil, though Yugi does still kind of take point on that. Everyone does pitch in from time to time, Jinochi most especially, but by the end, by the final arc of the manga, everyone is integral to winning. And it was in chapters like this one when we got the first inklings that that's how things were going to play out later on. I really like these two chapters. They're basically just one big fight scene, but they're one big good fight scene, so I don't blame them for being that. But as per usual, guys, I'd like to know, what did you think of these chapters of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you have read them, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.